This is Irene Woods. In this video, I'm demonstrating sewing up the yoke seam after the pieces have been blocked. And then I'm going to show you how to hang it back on the machine and knit 1x1 ribbing using a Brother 260 machine without a ribber. And this would be the same way, exactly the same way, that we would make hand-latched ribbing on the LK150 and the KX350 machines. This is the bulky pattern, and the yoke is made in 4 sections. There aren't enough needles to do it in 2, which is the more traditional way on a knitting machine. So that also means we have 4 seams to deal with. I have begun sewing from the top down. For me, that was the easiest way to handle it. You might be better to start at the bottom and work up, but whichever way you go, make sure that the edges match along the top and also along the bottom. I would also like to point out, now, I've been sewing this using mattress stitch, which seems to be the easiest way for me to handle it. That way I can work from the right side and I can watch each band as I come to it to make sure that I have it matched at the seam line. If it doesn't match, then you need to rip it out and do it again, because it's pretty obvious when it doesn't match. I found that it was easiest to just make maybe 4 or 5 stitches and then check. It's a lot easier to take out 4 or 5 stitches and do them over than it is to do the whole seam and realize you're off and then have to go back and do it over. So what I'm going to do now is finish this seam. This is the last one that I need to make. What I've done is join 3 seams. You can't see it, they're piled up over here on the side. But I have joined 3 of the seams and I've left the 4th one open for the neckband. So I'm going to finish this seam and then I'll be back. I'm rehanging the top of the yoke back on the machine so that I can do the neckband. Everything's been seamed together, and I started picking up on the right side of the bed. This is something you need to pay attention to. I'm to within 2 stitches of the end of, this is a front or a back, anyway it's one of the bigger pieces, and I've reached 2 stitches before the edge. This stitch right here is the seam allowance, but we have to pick it up too. If we don't, this is a live stitch and it will eventually run. So I'm going to hang the 2nd stitch from the edge, then I'm going to pick up the edge stitch and put it onto that same needle. Now when we get to the other side, there's also a live stitch, and it's hiding in there, and you will find this happens quite frequently. You may have to just sort of get in there and dig for it, but you really do need to find this one, because if you don't get it, it will eventually run. In order to fold the seam allowance onto itself, or to fold it to the wrong side if that makes better sense, I'm putting the transfer tool in backwards from the way we normally use it. In other words, on the left side of the seam, I've put the transfer tool in from right to left. Then I'm also going to pick up the 2nd stitch from the edge. That is a very tight stitch, and quite likely one of yours will do that too. Just be sure you get both of them picked up and both of them in the hook of the needle. I'm going to rehang the rest of the neck and then I'll be back. I have reached the next seam. So I'm going to show you again what I do at the seam. Pick up the second stitch from the edge, and then pick up the edge stitch. Put the transfer tool in from left to right, hang it on the second needle from the edge. And once again, these edge stitches tend to be on the tight side. Sometimes if you pull the waist yarn like I'm doing right now, it may not loosen it a lot, but at least it will pull that stitch up out of where it's buried on the edge. I'm going to put the transfer tool in from the back or from right to left. Depends on how you're looking at it. But the transfer tool is going in backwards from the way we normally use it. So I have that stitch on the transfer tool. I'm going to pick up the next one and then place both of them together on the next needle. I have the entire neck edge back on the machine. It's 102 stitches, and that's going to make a very wide neckband, probably too wide for the size small and the size medium. If you want a closer fitting neck for size small, I would recommend that you take out 4 stitches in each section. In other words, when you're hanging it back on the machine, decrease 4 stitches in each front and back and 4 stitches in each sleeve. That will pull it up closer to your neck. If you're making a size medium, I'd recommend that you decrease 2 stitches in the front, the back, and each sleeve. That will take out a total of 8. For the larger sizes, you can leave it just like it is. I like a wider neckband on a round yoke sweater. I think it fits better. I'm not a big fan of having it pulled right up to my neck. Now, if you like it that way, then by all means make the neckband with fewer stitches or with a tighter tension. What I'm going to do now is, I need to back up a minute. If you have a ribber, at this point what you would want to do is transfer every other stitch down to the ribber. Now I hung the entire neck back on the machine off a waist yarn, and then I knitted 1 row of the main color, and that's because the main color is actually the dark color for the sweater. Even though I'd been using mint for the yoke, I'm going to be using the forest green for the rest of the sweater. And it makes less of a jog or a less noticeable join if you knit the first row in the darker solid color, then transfer down to the ribber. But you can certainly do it however you please. You can also make this as a single thickness band, which would be just 8 rows plus the loose row for the bind off. Or you can make this a double thickness band, in which case you'd be knitting 16 rows. I'm also going to do something that is called tension control shaping. All that means is I'm going to turn the tension dial down 1 click every 2 rows. And if I'm knitting a double band, then when I get to row 8, I will knit 2 more rows at the tightest tension, turn the dial up 1 click, and knit 2 rows, and so on until I get back up to row count 16. Okay, that's the second row at main tension. I'm going to turn the tension dial down 1 click. Turn it down another click. Turn it down another click. Now this is the center of the neckband. So I'm going to leave it where it is and knit 2 rows. Turn the dial up 1 click. Turn the dial up 1 click. And I'm about to run out of yarn. Okay, I'm going to be 1 row short, but instead of tying in a new ball of yarn, I'm just going to knit 1 row this time. We're now going to work the ribbing. Depending on the brand of machine you have and the patterns that were written for it, this may be called converting to ribbing, dropping and relatching, or just simply relatching ribbing. It all means the same thing. What I've done is drop the 2nd stitch from the edge, and I've raveled it down until it's just 1 row above the waist yarn. And I put the hook in that first main color stitch. Now I'm going to catch the first rung of the ladder, and I'm going to latch it back up as a knit stitch on the purl background. Let me see if I can rearrange this camera just a little bit. Here's a better view of how to make the ribbing. What I've done is drop the stitch and ravel it back down to the waist yarn, but I've put the hook in 1 row above the waist yarn. In other words, in through the center of the first main color stitch. And on this sweater, this dark green is the main color. So now we need to latch it back up. This becomes a knit stitch on the purl background. This is awkward for a lot of people. If you don't have a ribber though, this is the way you would do it on your machine. Of course, you could also take it off and knit it by hand. I'll try to explain what I'm doing. I'm pulling down with quite a bit of pressure with my left hand. That keeps this ladder opened. And then I'm not really moving the latch tool much up and down or sideways. I'm just basically pushing it in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. Ravel the next column of stitches. Pull down with quite a bit of pressure with your left hand to keep that ladder opened, and then just once you get a rhythm going, it really picks up speed quite well.